pleasure and an honor to have Dr. Alan Goldhamer, the founder and creator of True North Health Center, really revolutionizing the medical industry, in my opinion. This is really special for me because I just finished a 14-day water fast at this facility. So I'm coming out of a 14-day water fast, just experienced the magic. And then I'm having this beautiful opportunity to communicate with Dr. Alan Goldhamer. And so, guys, I was a psychiatrist for 7 years. I went to medical school, did the residency, and these primary care doctors, they're not seeing one case of hypertension, one case of diabetes reverse. So think about that. Your uncle, your grandparent, they're all walking around, and this man revolutionizing the system right now. I'm telling you, I've been here and, I've been in my room creating, but I met a couple people, and one lady, 33-day water fast, prostate cancer markers down 75%. Another lady come in with pain in the abdomen from lymphoma. Pain is gone. And Dr. Goldhamer has written 2 revolutionary papers, and they're showing the benefits of water-only fasting, reversing hypertension, and also having a huge benefit on the heart, which is the number one cause of, if you want to call it, death in America. And so doing some revolutionary work. And I just also want to say, from the top down, True North Health Center, from the staff to the food, my entire experience has been really, really quite profoundly beautiful. There's an energy here that is conducive to healing. So it's an absolute pleasure and honor to have Dr. Alan Goldhamer on the show today. And you know what actually drew me here was I was watching a Rich Roll podcast. And I said, I've learned to listen to sound. Sound can never lie. So I was listening to Dr. Goldhamer as he was directing his sound current. And behind the sound, you'll find a person's intention. And I said, this doctor has something that I'm very curious about. And that's what drew me here. My bucket list was to do a water fast. And this is going to become an annual tradition for me. So it's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here, Dr. Goldhamer. Just wanted to kind of talk about that sound. I hear the passion in your voice. And what was it that got you started on this journey and, the passion? Where did that come from?
I think you made a really good point. You talked about that in traditional care, many of these conditions, patients never get well. And I was raised in a family that had lots of healthcare practitioners in it. Mm-hmm. And for example, with high blood pressure, it's common knowledge that once you have high blood pressure, you'll be on medications for the rest of your life. You'll never get well. And your physician will promise you, do exactly what you're told. You'll never get well. You'll be sick forever. And that you're going to take these medications that have all kinds of side effects, from chronic cough, fatigue, impotence, and even death. And that's just accepted because, to slightly reduce the risk of stroke, we've got to lower your blood pressure. And the only way that's seen to do that conventionally is with medications. And so I was raised with that type of thinking, but it just didn't seem logical to me. It didn't make sense that here you have a condition that in a natural setting is very rare, and yet in the world of the modern dietary and lifestyle choices, it's ubiquitous, it's common, it's the rule that over 60% of people are hypertensive by the time they reach, adulthood. To me, that just didn't make sense. And so when I started researching and looking into it, I found people like Herbert Shelton that wrote a book on fasting and said that you could actually reverse this condition, but that with diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting, that virtually everybody that had high blood pressure could achieve normal blood pressure without medication. And so we start thinking about, well, what's the actual cause of high blood pressure? It's certainly not a lack of hydrochlorothiazide or beta blockers or calcium channel antagonists. The problem turned out to be diet and lifestyle. And it turns out it's not just high blood pressure. It's also type 2 diabetes. And it's autoimmune diseases where the body's immune system is actually attacking itself, like rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis and ankylosing spondylitis and psoriasis and eczema. This whole class of conditions where it's the body's own immune system that's responsible for the symptoms. And it turns out many forms of cancer also seem to be tied to this dietary excess and lifestyle excess as being a cause of the problem. And so when I started really thinking about it, I realized that we weren't really addressing the actual issues. We were just doing Band-Aid type treatment with pills and potions and powders and surgeries, and wanted to figure out if there was a better way of addressing it. Seeing health and disease as really not just, completely separate issues, but a continuum, that health, like disease, had causes. And nobody ever talked about the cause of health. They only talked about the cause of diseases, but cause of health turned out to be healthful living, according to these people that I was reading. And healthful living involved diet, sleep, and exercise. So I've made a concerted effort to begin applying those principles of diet, sleep, and exercise. And then, of course, the question comes up, well, what diet? The greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh diet associated with the people like Dr. Atkins, or maybe a plant-based diet that people like John McDougall and Caldwell Esselstyn and T. Colin Campbell are talking about, trying to make sense of these absolutely divergent recommendations, completely opposite recommendations. But in reading standard nutrition texts like Goodhart and Scholl's and just basic nutrition texts, it seemed to me that there really wasn't that much controversy. That, you had micronutrients that you had to consume at minimum levels, that you had macronutrients that you had to consume at acceptable levels, and that too much of anything caused disease. Too much micronutrients, too much macronutrients. And so by the time I was about 16 or 17 years old, I'd come to terms with the fact that it made a lot more sense to eat a whole plant food diet, whole natural foods, rather than rely on pills and potions and powders and all kinds of concentrated things. And that exercise seemed to be an important issue, that people naturally would do that. And that sleep seemed to be an important issue, that sleep deprivation was associated with all kinds of problems. And so diet, sleep, exercise, and then this idea that once people were suffering from dietary excess, you had to undo it somehow. Fasting was a natural, conclusion, that fasting, this complete abstinence of all substances except water in an environment of complete rest, would reverse the consequence of dietary excess. And that's exactly what we found that it does. For the last 40 years, we've run the True North Health Center, where we've specialized in medically supervised water-only fasting. So patients come in, we remove their medications, we put them on a water-only fast, and then after fasting, we put them on a whole plant food diet and get them sleeping and exercising properly. And what we've seen is that the conditions of dietary excess reverse themselves. The body heals itself. And we've, as a 501c3 nonprofit research organization, our goal is to publish research in peer-reviewed journals that substantiates that this can be done safely and effectively. And I think we've proven in the case of high blood pressure and diabetes and lymphoma and these related conditions, you can do it safely. It works consistently. The problem is you have to be willing to actually deal with this kind of a radical approach, radical meaning root or cause, right? From radicus. And if you deal with the root or cause, you can actually, the body will actually heal itself. That's the big message.
Yeah, I love that. And I've been a witness to that, and because I've been here for the last 17 days, and I've literally been witnessing people's cancer shrinking and the energy of these people transforming. And, I was even in a taxi cab. I left the campus one time, and when I was in that taxi cab, this guy had been driving for 11 years. And, he would pick up people and he would drop off people here at True North. And he casually asked me, he says, "Oh, yeah, how's your experience?" And, I told him it was fabulous. I'm feeling clear, feeling productive. I'm feeling creative. And when I first came in, I was traveling for 3 months. I was not in that state. He's just a normal, old elderly man. And he looks at me and he says, "I've been doing this for 11 years. And he's a normal guy. All he says, the only word I have is miracles." In fact, he hears all these stories and he goes to his doctor, his dialysis doctor, and tells his dialysis doctor, and his dialysis doctor won't believe him. And so it's actually the words that Dr. Goldhamer is saying. If you really listen very closely, he's saying that the body has an innate ability to heal itself. And when you take away the dietary excess, you sleep, and all of that is monitored here for you medically in a safe environment. I mean, we're talking about our uncle's heart condition, the diabetes, we're talking about, and, all of these cancer shrinking, we're talking, the body knows how to heal itself. And so that's why I feel like this work is so revolutionary. And I was intrigued also, not only for the physical benefits, but also for the mental benefits, because starting around on day 3, I started feeling super clear. Um, Dr. Goldhamer, could you speak a little bit about your experience with what you found
Yeah.
with that?
Well, what's interesting is physical health is the natural state. When we put the
Uh-huh.
body under too much load, we get compromised physically. And I believe that the
Mm-hmm.
same thing is true psychologically and emotionally, that our natural state is to be in balance. It's just we get pushed out of balance because we're fatigued or we're stressed or we have,
Mm-hmm.
physiological imbalances because of our diet and lifestyle choices. So when you go into an environment where you can get enough rest and you
Mm-hmm.
can, not have excess amounts of stress put on you, and you support yourself physiologically with a good
Mm-hmm.
diet or with fasting, the natural tendency of the body is to heal itself. So whether it's depression or anxiety or other psychological challenges, it's not surprising to find that those
Mm-hmm.
also tend to be spontaneously resolving themselves.
Yeah.
Now, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that the body's capacity to heal itself is unlimited, and it certainly doesn't happen instantly. But
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen physical or psychological problems that don't improve when you get rid of the reasons why the problem developed in the first place. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that the surprising thing for most people is that the body is a self-healing, self-regulating organism. Our job is mostly to get out of the way and to stop interfering with the body's ability to heal itself. And one of the mistakes I think is made is
Mm-hmm.
often conventional medical care is often about
Yeah.
suppressing the symptoms associated with disease rather than actually dealing
Mm-hmm.
with why those symptoms develop. So if you have
Mm.
high blood pressure, we'll give you drugs to lower your blood pressure, but that has nothing to do with getting rid of the reason you're
Mm-hmm.
hypertensive. And that's why they
Yeah.
tell you, honestly, from the get-go, you'll be on the drugs the rest of your life.
Mm.
They're essentially telling you, we know this will not deal with the cause of your problem, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
deal with the effects of it. And, that's the best we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Because, what are you going to tell people? Eat properly, rest properly, exercise
Mm-hmm.
properly? That seems impractical. That seems
Mm-hmm.
out of reach. That doesn't seem realistic to most people. Even if they know that it might work, it just doesn't, people don't want to do that. They don't want to quit smoking, drinking, using
Mm-hmm.
caffeine, other engaging in
Yeah.
sleep deprivating behavior patterns. They don't want to try to find meaningful work. They don't want to have to find people to interact with that they can effectively interact with socially. And so
Mm-hmm.
it seems beyond belief
Mm-hmm.
that it's possible to actually create an environment where the body can heal itself. And all we've done is given
Yeah.
people a taste of the fact that, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to decide if it's worth the trouble, because you live in a world designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable. And everywhere you go, people will give you what you want, but not what you need. And so in order to change that is incredibly difficult. It's probably the most challenging thing that most of my patients will ever do in their life, which is adopt a health promoting diet and lifestyle in a world that's
Yeah.
designed to do just the opposite, to just keep you down. And in fact, many people find the social aspects are
Yeah.
the most difficult part of this healing journey, is
Mhm.
the pressure they get from their well-meaning but misguided friends and relatives, thinking that adopting healthy habits is actually
Yeah.
some kind of craziness.
Mhm.
I have many people,
Yeah.
I've had the police called before. I had the policeman come one time wanted to interview one of the patients because the relatives called and said that the person was being held against their will by religious cultists to be starved to death so they could go to be with Jesus.
Hmm.
Because it
Wow.
just seems so
Yeah.
improbable that doing nothing could actually allow the body to heal itself. Most
Yeah.
people think
Yeah.
if you get on a plane in New York and you flew all the way to California, you would die over Colorado from starvation unless you ate the pretzels. They think the pretzels saved their life.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of standard American diet misinformation, and even the doctors of today have been, if you want to say, in medical school, they haven't been taught that there's a cure. They haven't been taught about the body's innate capacity for healing, and so
Yeah.
but
We
I
have a
think
residency program here
Mhm.
where doctors come and train and they're able to
Yeah.
learn how to use this. And the most common comment from these, and these are often second or third year residents, so they've had plenty of medical experience, but they'll say, wow, that's the first time I've ever seen anybody with, diabetes or with high blood pressure actually get well. Getting well is not even part of the paradigm. It's not even a consideration. It's all management of the various symptoms and then the side effects from the management. And, it's not even considered. Well, what if we made radical diet and lifestyle changes? What would that do?
Yeah,
Because
and
that's not even on the.
I want to piggyback on that because what I noticed as well was when I was here and I was walking around and I was, interacting with the people who are here, I started noticing that these people are present. And as a psychiatrist for many, many years, I'm sure people never see people get better with hypertension, primary care doctors, but as a psychiatrist prescribing these SSRIs, prescribing these SNRIs, I never saw anyone get better from these medications. Once again, band-aiding the symptom without going to the root cause. But as I was walking around here, I mean, we're talking about, people were present. And that's what I noticed. They weren't anxious. They weren't depressed. They were present. They were engaged. They were in the moment. And that's what I started realizing. Oh, the anxiety and depression, as you said, a natural consequence of allowing the body to rest, sleep, and get the right supplies and energy is presence. And there goes anxiety. There goes depression. And so I started realizing, wow, I feel like there's tremendous amounts, not only to mention clearing out the trauma in the body is what, on day 3, the autophagy starts happening, clearing out the dead cells. And I started to put 2 and 2 together. And I said, oh, wow, Dr. Goldhamer, you should do a study on anxiety and depression and add that to your list, because I can see it. I am observing how it gets better. And if you go to a psychiatrist, guys, you're not going to get that. And I also want to add, Dr. Goldhamer says, you just kind of if you don't do anything, but the way that they've set it up, the way that I am here, they have staff come around on you twice a day. You're in a safe environment. The staff from everybody down is really on board and in alignment. And that makes the environment much easier for me. If I was trying to do this at home, probably would have been difficult. And then you also get education during the day. And education is important. And then you take that education and you can use this as a catalyst, for your high, not only for anxiety, depression, but while I've been here, I've been so creative. When you're clear, you get creative. And I can't emphasize enough that you are who you've been looking for. And this is an amazing environment for your body's innate healing ability to activate. So I just see tremendous potential.
I have one patient who's been a regular patient for the last, 30 years. And the only time he actually works is when he comes here. He's a screenwriter. And he does it fast, and he finds that's the time he can do his screenwriting. And I don't know what he does the rest of the year, but he's not working. When he comes in here, nobody sees him for a few weeks. And some movies that we've all seen, were written here during fasting. So, to the extreme.
He stole my script, Dr. Allen. That's going to be me. I already have. I already know. Next time I'm going to write a book, I'm coming here for 40 days. For 40 days, I'm coming here and I'm bringing my computer. I was so productive. It was quite beautiful. And that
shows you how much your natural productivity is inhibited by the normal crap that we all put up with, in our life. The point is, you were at your kind of natural state, without all the distractions and the other things that we all put up with.
That's it. You just nailed it right there. I was in my natural state, and my natural state is presence, and my natural state is creativity. And that's for everybody, not just me. But that leads me to another topic, because, dopamine is kind of, regulating drive. And, some people say the gut-brain axis, right? Some people say 80 to 90% of the serotonin is created in the gut. And we just discussed how, the gut is probably the second brain. Dr. Allen, could you expand a little bit about what you think is happening to the gut?
You have an intestinal microbiome. You have about, trillions of creatures, but at least 5 pounds of organisms living in a normal gut. Those organisms represent about 1,000 different strains of organisms in a normal, healthy gut. If you look at the gut microbiome of people say they're on heavy animal-based diets, meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products, or they're eating sugar and highly processed foods, their flora is different than people that are eating a plant-based diet. And what the flora gives off is different. In other words, these organisms are living creatures swimming around, eating, drinking, breathing, and pooing inside your digestive system right now. And they can poo things like TMA, which is trimethylamine oxidase, which can cause cancer and heart disease. Or they can poo vitamin K and, fertilizer. And what your organisms give off is dependent on what you feed them. So it's not surprising that what you put in your mouth has a profound effect on these organisms. They're such a critical part of our immune system, and that produce, like you mentioned, dopamine, serotonin, neurotransmitters, all kinds of stuff. So the diet's not just the micronutrients that you're eating and the macronutrients, but also the effect that it has on these organisms. Now, if you want to get a sense of how important these organisms are, remember, if you took a human being and separated into the cells that are human cells and cells that are non-human cells, like protozoa and bacteria, there's more non-human cells than human cells that make up a human being. So these are really important, and that they care what you feed them. And so one of the reasons we believe this whole plant food SOS-free diet is so helpful is because it helps cultivate the normal type of flora that support human health. And what fasting may be doing is helping reboot that imbalanced gut microbiome. It's kind of like, you know, when you have a computer that becomes corrupted and it won't work and you don't know, you turn the whole thing off, you turn it on, and you don't know why, but now it starts working again because you've rebooted the hard drive. An analogy is that that's kind of what's happening with humans when they water fast. They kind of shut everything down. There's a big drop off in the microflora. And then when you start eating a healthy diet afterwards, you regrow the normal flora that's supposed to be supporting your health. So one of the mechanisms of fasting is probably normalizing gut microbiome. And we've actually done a study with along with Luigi Fontana from Washington University where we looked at microbiome changes before and after long-term fasting.
Cool.
And the first paper actually in that series just came out in Lancet preprints looking at cardiometabolic changes. And the next paper will be on these microbiome changes. So we're starting to look at this. What I can tell you is it's really complicated. And despite what people are claiming, it's not really clear even what normal flora looks like in healthy people yet, let alone specifically what interaction has, and let alone what pills and potions are going to alter this microbiome in a positive way. So I think we're just beginning to get a feel of the changes, but probably what we'll find out is that one of the benefits of fasting is rebooting this microbiome.
Yeah, beautiful. The microbiome and how fasting resets the microbiome and how these little guys, a tremendous amount of bacteria, they literally feed off of the food we give them. And these little guys determine our thoughts. They determine our personalities. They have a personality of their own. And when you can do the salt, and I want to get into that, the sugar, oil, salt-free diet that is recommended for maintenance after the fast, that it kind of resets the gut microbiome, therefore your serotonin and your dopamine to a place, like I said, I'm experiencing is just me, an organic version of me. And in that state of presence, there goes depression, anxiety. And then there also comes this sense of contentness, which serotonin does. And then also from that place, I can start being creative. So Dr. Allen, I wanted to kind of dive into the maintenance diet of sugar, oil, and salt. There's a lot of, plant-based whole food diets, but this is one of the first times I've ever heard no sugar, oil, and salt. Could you take us a little deeper into why?
Well, we advocate, a diet that's a vegan diet, so no meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products. We know that animal products are biologically concentrated sources of toxins, that their excess of fat and protein leads to kidney disease and heart disease. Excess calories leads to obesity, which leads to visceral fat. The visceral fat produces inflammation, which causes heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. So the getting rid of the animal foods, I think, has become more accepted by many people. But the problem is you can go on a vegan diet that's complete junk. Soda pop, highly processed foods can be vegan. That is no animal products, but they're still full of highly processed, hyper-concentrated calories, sugar, oil, and salt. Too much sugar, people pretty much realize now the empty calories, disruption of the gut microbiome, the obesity and visceral fat that comes from eating sugary products. Also, when you eat sugar, your blood insulin goes up to drive it into the cells where it belongs, but that drives your sugar down. Then your brain thinks you're starving. You get binging, craving. It leads to all kinds of disruption. Too much fat. People know the fat to eat is the fat that you wear, that 9 calories per gram of highly concentrated fat products in the forms of oils and fried foods makes people fat, interferes with the protection against heart disease and cancer and other things. The more controversial thing that we recommend is also eliminating added salt. And people say, rightfully so, that sodium is an essential nutrient without which you would die. But it turns out you get all the sodium you need from a whole plant food diet, just like you get all the fat you need from a whole plant food diet, and you get all the calories you need and the protein that you need. You don't need to eat these added sources of animal products, oil, salt, or sugar in order to get the macronutrients that you need. And the same thing's true with sodium. Sodium is naturally present in foods, particularly fruit and vegetable materials. And you get somewhere between 0.5 and 1 gram of sodium a day eating a whole plant food diet. When we add salt to the diet, there's a bit of a problem that develops. Number one, when you think about that microbiome we were just talking about, when you realize that salt is used as a preservative to keep to affect bacterial growth, they salt meat and stuff like that. When you put a high salt diet into the gut, it's not surprising that the microbiome is going to be influenced by this high sodium intake. It also is responsible for high blood pressure and the fluid retention, increased blood volume that comes from eating excess of salt in the food. But probably most important is a process called passive overeating. And people might say, well, wait, they understand why oil and sugar might make people fat, but how could eating salt make people fat when salt has no calories? There's no calories in salt. It's just sodium chloride. But when you eat salt, it stimulates what's called passive overeating. If you give rodents a normal chow, they'll eat a certain amount, and then their satiety mechanisms kick in and they stop eating. And there is no obesity in rodents on a natural food diet. They get to a certain size, their natural apostatic mechanisms control it. But you add these chemicals to the feed, like salt, oil, and sugar, they'll eat 49% more weight in 60 days because they'll eat more. And they say, well, yeah, because it tastes better. But that's what tasting better is stimulating a chemical in the brain called dopamine, which is the neurochemical associated with pleasure. And this was the essence of the book we wrote, The Pleasure Trap, that people are artificially stimulating dopamine production in the brain. They overeat, they become fat, they get the visceral fat, and then they get the disease. And so salt is an important part of that. If you just eat, say, your fill of rice, you'll eat a certain amount of rice, then you don't want anymore, you're full. Everything else being equal, you salt that rice up, you'll eat more rice before you feel full. And as a consequence, that's how salt can contribute to obesity, is even if you're eating healthy foods, you're going to eat more of them than what you would normally stop at because of the artificial stimulation of dopamine in the brain.
That makes sense. So
going on a vegan SOS-free diet gets rid of the animal foods, the excess fat and protein. It gets rid of the salt, oil, and sugar, which gets rid of the obesity, which gets rid of the dietary excess, which allows these conditions to reverse themselves. And fasting just speeds this process up.
And once again, I'm a witness to this because everything Dr. Goldhamer is saying, I just experienced this. And so actually, I feel like, on day 3, I could actually feel myself going into ketosis. And I do want to talk to you later about that. But I went into ketosis and I was clear, visceral fat was coming off. And then after that, I can literally feel that my taste buds, my artificial dopamine that I was getting from food was reset. It was reset. And so
we actually did a study on that where we actually quantified response to salt and sugar, minimal sensitivity, and the hedonic response to salt and sugar and processed foods. We've actually demonstrated scientifically that the palate actually changes during fasting. Your perception of salt and sugar, your hedonic response to highly processed food changes. We knew it from what patients were telling us, but we've actually been able to prove it. And so people that want to go to fasting.org can actually download our studies. And one of those studies is on the neuroadaptive response of fasting to helping people make dietary changes.
And I'm a witness to that, because that's what happened to me. My taste buds have changed. Yeah. When I eat the foods, that they're serving here, it's delicious. And I can't even imagine and visualize for myself right now. Once a month, I used to crave, after a long day of work, I would come home and once a month, I would just order a large pizza and I would eat the whole pizza filled with, cheese and salt. I can't imagine myself doing that. My taste buds have been reset and my dopamine has been reset. And then also I noticed when I'm running outside, my sense of smell, which is part of taste, is completely
profoundly. It's profoundly effective. Yeah. It's profoundly affected. All the senses tend to be heightened, and they're not really heightened; they're just back to normal.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I had a patient once who loved old Chicago style pizza, the deep dish type pizza.
Yep.
And he came in. He had heart disease. He'd had a heart attack. We normalized his blood pressure. We overcame his diabetes, and he was very diligent with the diet. He was a real good old boy. But he said at a year he wanted to go back to old Chicago pizza just to try one piece. Because that used to be his favorite thing. He went back and he ordered a piece, hadn't had anything in a year. He tried it, but he said they must have changed the recipe because it was so greasy and salty he couldn't even eat it.
Yeah, it's the testament, man, how we were organically created, right? And how far we've strayed from that. Dr. Goldhamer, there's kind of a trend going on these days, and a lot of people are kind of talking about the keto diet.
Yes.
Any perspective there? Love your wisdom
Sure.
on that.
So these fasting mimicking diets are designed to help people try to lose weight by mimicking some of the effects of fasting. And one of the effects of fasting, and the reason why people can come to the center and fast for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks without being hungry, is because once you go into ketosis, the hunger drive is blunted. There's a hunger blunting effect of ketosis. And so in fasting, you can fast people and you'd think, oh, they'd be so hungry, but they're not. They're actually quite comfortable, as you would have experienced. Well, when you go on a low carbohydrate diet, your body goes into, just like in fasting, into ketosis. So your brain changes from burning glucose to burning fat, especially beta hydroxybutyric acid, a byproduct of fat metabolism, one of the ketones. So for a while, that's helpful to people because they're not hungry, so they can resist overeating. They're just eating usually animal-based products, meat, fish, fowl, this type of stuff. So they can do it, eat less calories, and lose some weight. The problem is what's good for short term isn't necessarily a good long-term strategy. And going on some dead Dr. Atkins diet, where you're on a high-fat, high-protein diet, is not a health-promoting strategy. And in the long run, of course, you get all the problems that people get from high-fat, high-protein diets. You might lose some weight short-term, but it's not a good way of maintaining health. So yes, it's a fasting mimicking effect, but it's not actually the benefits of fasting followed by a whole plant food diet. So we don't advocate high-fat, high-protein diets on a long-term basis, but we certainly acknowledge that on a short-term basis, people are able to use it as weight loss strategy. But if your only goal is weight loss, you can just cut your leg off at the hip and lose 40 pounds overnight. And it's not healthy. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's the fastest way to lose 40 pounds. Just use the old chainsaw.
Yeah. And there's also kind of this movement on the supplements have become such a huge thing. And it's weird because before I came here, I was using a lot of different supplements. And as I'm refeeding right now after my 14-day water fast, there's certain ones that I don't want to use anymore. And can you speak to a little bit about that? What have you noticed with people?
I think a lot of problems are created by too much macronutrients like fat and protein, but also there are problems caused by too much micronutrients. And there's good studies supporting that. For example, vitamin A supplementation increases cancer death risk in virtually every study that's measured vitamin A supplementation in cancer. They'll have to discontinue the study because the death rate would increase in those that are supplemented.
Wow.
Vitamin C causes vitamin C oxidase production, which will cause rebound scurvy in pregnant moms that are given vitamin C supplementation in larger dosage. You have problems with many of these nutrients, vitamin D and other fat-soluble nutrients in excess of intake associated with serious disorders and disease. So too much is a problem, just like, starvation is a problem too. But dietary excess is also a problem. And actually, today, more people are suffering from dietary excess than they're suffering from dietary deficiency. And so while there may be some things like vitamin B12 that you might consider supplementing, for example, in vegans, the routine use of pills and potions that's based on the fact that deficiency is the cause of the problem is, I think, misguided in most cases because it's not deficiency, but dietary excess that's the dominant cause of problems. And when deficiency is a problem, the answer isn't pills and potions. It's changing the diet so the diet provides the raw materials you need to sustain health. And that's why a whole plant food SOS-free diet is so valuable. You have to eat a large volume of these nutrient-dense but calorically low-density foods. So they're high in micronutrients but low in caloric density. And that allows people to eat large amounts of food, maintain optimum weight, but get the quantity and quality of nutrients they need to sustain optimum health.
I see. So not only is it dietary excess, sometimes it can actually be supplement excess. And it's
a lot of patients, a lot of people get benefit just when we stop the bag full of pills that they're taking when they come in, supplements as well as prescription medication. Just getting them off the drugs is enough that the body starts healing itself. In fact, it's a problem for some of our studies because we'll enroll somebody in a hypertensive study, but if they just clean up their diet, they eat a healthy diet, get rid of the pills, a lot of times their blood pressure is normal before we even get to fasting. They just heal themselves up. It's really quite annoying.
And I just want to piggyback off that because as a psychiatrist, SSRIs, staple medicine, once again, it doesn't treat the root cause. It band-aids the symptom. But what I found also is it's tremendously difficult for a lot of mental health patients to get off their psychiatric medications.
That's a huge problem. And, there's a book, Emperor of Anatomy of an Epidemic. Anatomy of an Epidemic argues that the use of serotonin inhibitors, particularly Prozac, introduced in 1986, deactivate the D2 receptors in the brain. So when you stop taking them, you get anxiety and depression. And then they try to tell you have a biochemical defect and you'll need to be on drugs the rest of your life. But the scientific literature is clear. There is no biochemical defect that's responsible for causing depression and anxiety. That is made up. It was a presumed explanation that turns out not to be true. But it is true that when you withdraw serotonin uptake inhibitors, you get depression and anxiety as a cause of the withdrawal. So you have to wean these drugs off. It's a pain in the ass. It can take a long time. We spend a lot of time working very diligently to help people carefully wean these meds so they can actually get healthy. And there's, very little support that that's a good long-term strategy. Even the people that will argue it as a short-term, approach to dealing with acute problems, it's clearly not a good long-term strategy for getting healthy, physically or psychologically. So, our approach would be to try to identify the causes of the depression and anxiety and change the environment to support a person actually being able to function, maybe within their limitations. Trying to pretend that every person is capable of handling every environment is a mistake. It's just like not everybody can handle this, for example, the physical rigors of being a roofer. Not everybody has the physical strength, capacity, balance, and stuff. There are people that would not be good trying to become a roofer. And not everybody is capable of handling the same kind of noxious, stressful environment that is inherent in many of people's lives. So we have to try to change the environment to more match the capacities of the individuals, both physically and psychologically. And so, but very little effort is put into trying to help reduce the psychological stresses, in my opinion. Most of it's put into trying to increase a person's capacity to deal with stress rather than reduce the stresses that they're having to face.
Yeah.
And so a long-term strategy might be better looking at the diet and the lifestyle and the environment rather than just trying to suppress the symptoms of disease with medications.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of emphasize because, what True North Health Center is doing is really revolutionary. I used to have a lot of clients and patients come to me looking for a safe place that will help them reset their body, help their anxiety, help their depression, and also help them get off of psychiatric medications. And on this planet, there are very, very few places on this planet that are, can actually help you do that. And so, as a testament, once again, I just want to say that this place is very rare, True North. And we're talking about, if you've been listening, you can reverse heart disease. We're seeing cancer markers go down. We're seeing mental health conditions and so I think the potential here is tremendous. And that leads me to this, Dr. Goldhamer, like, I know there were people even in your family that might have been skeptical, and we have an entire system right now that's doing sick care model rather than treating the root cause and healthcare model. As a revolutionary in this field who's been at it for quite some time, how do you see the best case that we can actually get treatments that work, the health system? How can we change the sick model into a health model?
Yeah, I think it's from the ground up rather than the top down. I know my own uncle was a medical doctor. He taught at the VA. And when he found out when I was 16, I decided to go into this field. And he said that I was not going to go into alternative medicine, that nobody in our family would go to a doctor like that, let alone become a doctor like that. He said, better I should be a communist spy. And he was vehemently opposed to me having anything to do with this. But I know my dad took me aside. He was a pretty serious guy. And he said, son, I don't know anything about alternative medicine. But anything that makes him that angry and mad, it can't be bad. So you stick to your guns and good luck to you. So he encouraged me. And ironically enough, my father was one of our first patients, underwent a 26-day water fast. He'd been having TIAs and had lost cognitive capacity, wasn't able to remember the name of his grandkids. He had to retire from teaching. It was, and he did 26 days of fasting. He had a fabulous outcome. 20 years later, he helped edit The Pleasure Trap, and ended up living a long and productive life. Had a good life and a good death when he did pass away at 88 years old. And similarly, my mother, whose friends used to make just terrible give her all kinds of terrible problems from her sticking to their son's crazy diet recommendations. She said when she was 92 years old, she told me that all of her friends had died. All 52 of her lifelong friends. She had a list. They were all dead. And she said it was really a problem because she was 92 and it was hard making new friends because even friends 10 years younger than her were still too old to do anything that she wanted to do. They were all busy with their doctor visits and their pills and potions. They didn't want to play bridge and go out and do this stuff. And she said, Alan, you have to warn your patients if they're going to adopt this diet, make younger friends. And she said, not just a little younger, a lot younger, so that when they get older, they'll have people that are still around, or maybe adopt a few friends that have health habits so there will be somebody left.
And that's an amazing point, because right now in the health movement, they're calling it biohacking, and there's all these people out there who are talking about longevity and all of these crazy supplements, spending millions and millions of dollars on these supplements, and then and that's not even to mention, right? But right now, if you just listen to what Dr. Allen said, your body's natural state, when you give it the right environment and the right diet, is longevity. Outliving her friends to the point, and not only longevity, but it's also, if you want to call it, quality of life.
Well, I think that's the important thing is life expectancy. That is how long a person's average life is going to be born today, is largely determined by genetics and luck. But quality of life, healthy life expectancy, is largely determined by diet and lifestyle choices. So if you'd like to live a healthy life until your older age out slower, then this is the type of diet and lifestyle that's likely to help do that. I mean, I see it. I'm 65 years old. I play basketball with people that are 20 or 30 years younger 4 times a week. And you see them even in their 30s and 40s starting to age out. They're losing the ability to compete and play because of a premature aging process. So it's not that you're not going to age. You'll certainly age, but you age at a more natural rate. And so you can maintain a high level of quality function, cognitive function, physical function, until you reach your genetic potential. And hopefully after having had a good life, you have a good death when you go to sleep one night and don't wake up. Rather than spend the last 20 years of your life unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed, waiting for people to come and change your diaper because you've had a preventable stroke or heart attack. And, that I think is more important to people, high, healthy life expectancy than even absolutely how long they're going to live.
Yeah, that's huge too, because I worked as a skilled nursing facility psychiatrist, and our end of life care right now, if you look at what they're doing with our parents and our elders, the food that they're feeding them. When I used to walk and round in that place for a year, after a year, I could not do it. The level of air, the food, and when they cry out for our help, these are our parents. They give them mind-numbing psych medications and they're drooling at the mouth, and that is the system that we are living in right now. And in
they
this
feed them
podcast,
just like you feed them in the hospital.
That's right. Dead food, right? And so literally, and this is a huge thing, because what we're saying right now is that by simple lifestyle and occasional fasting and adopting a healthy lifestyle, your quality of life and the end of your life, which is, you want to be with your kids, you want to be with your family, you want to be enjoying the fruits of your labor. This is all possible, and really all you have to do is allow your body to innately heal itself. And the best place I found is True North Healing Center here in Santa Rosa, California, from the top down. And so if you've been listening to this podcast, there's we've touched on so many different things. Your gut brain, anxiety, depression, reversing heart disease, cancer markers going down, end of life care. We're talking about every single thing. Your body has an innate wisdom and ability to heal itself if you give it the right environment. And not only that, you'll come into presence, you'll come into your organic, natural, God-given birthright, which is to be you, without all of these external influences. And that is the greatest offering and gift, in my opinion, that you can offer the earth. And that's what I saw in Dr. Allen when I saw him on the Rich Roll podcast. When I think back, I said he was organically just himself. And that was a magnetic pull for me to come here. And when I came here, I had been traveling around the world doing my work for 3 months. I was not in a great state. And I'm telling you, over 14 days, it's amazing what can happen in that sort of amount of time.
When you really think about it, we were doing essentially nothing. All we're doing
Hmm.
is creating kind of an environment for your body to do what it naturally does. That's
That's
what's
right.
hard for people to imagine. They always want to think about some deficiency or some pill or
Hmm.
potion or some outside treatment or force, when it's all, from our viewpoint, just getting out of the way and letting the body do what it naturally does.
That's right. And but I will say there was an amount of willpower on my part that it takes. And so there is a desire, there has to be a desire. And I had this desire. Like I said, you know what? I do not care. I want to feel healthy. I do not care. I want to be able to show up for my family. I do not care. And so, Dr. Allen, what is kind of the ideal, and that's producing, it's reset my entire dopamine system. I'm not getting dopamine right now from salt in the food. I'm getting dopamine from
Internally, sure.
authentic internally, like when I'm doing things that I feel really good about. And so it's reset my entire pleasure system, which is the perfect title. Yeah.
It's interesting to see the types of patients that we see. There's one type of patient that's highly motivated by pain, debility, and fear of death. These are
Mm.
people suffering from lymphoma and high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune diseases. And they'll pretty much do anything if they can get out of pain and not have to give up the ship. So that's one type of highly motivated patient: pain, debility, fear of death. But the people that I think get the most benefit from fasting are actually healthy people that are using it to kind of reboot their system and stay healthy. And we're going to be doing a long-term study coming up next year where we'll be enrolling patients and tracking them the rest of their life, really looking at, does diet and lifestyle and periodic fasting allow people to avoid that last 20 years of debility that most people experience.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things we're looking at. And what I've seen so
Mhm.
far is that the people that get the most benefit are actually healthy people using it preventively. And we've done a study. It's just coming out. It's been accepted for
Yeah.
publication. And it looked at 8 healthy people that were not high blood pressure, had normal blood pressure, had normal, but the magnitude of changes in their cardiometabolic risk factors was actually higher than the sick people. That they
Hmm.
actually got more objective improvement than even the
Mm.
people that were sick. And I think we're going to find that that's who really gets the most benefit of fasting. Is people like yourself. Basically healthy guys, you're not suffering with any particular problems, but you use this thing
Sure.
to reboot, and then the magnitude of change is actually higher because your body is vital and
Yeah.
energetic, and it's capable of making big changes. And I think
Yeah.
that's who our most enthusiastic supporters are, actually healthy people using fasting preventatively.
Yeah.
Even though we
Yeah.
treat more sick people in the
Yeah.
clinic, I
Yeah.
think that's the people that get the most benefit.
Yeah, and that's an amazing point because that's exactly why I came in. I was, relatively on paper healthy, but I'm telling you guys, like peak potential, like
Okay.
your peak potential, your capacity to be creative, it's limitless. And this is such a amazing catalyst for me. In fact, I mean, all the supplements, all of the tools out there, all these biohacking things. I'm going to be
Right.
honest with you, like forget all that. Right. Like for me personally, anytime I need a reset, I'm coming here. Anytime I need to write a book, I'm coming here. Anytime I need to do something important in the world and get clear before I go do it, I'm coming here. And I understand, like, the potential behind this because I only did 14 days. I actually originally intended and wanted to do 40 days, but I didn't have the time. And so I want to ask you this, Dr. Goldhamer, like, we see, David, Elijah, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, they all did a fast. And it's crazy.
Right.
Jesus he does a 40-day fast. And he comes out and all of a sudden he's turning water into wine. He's walking. I mean, like, something happened. Something happened during that
Well,
fast.
we ask our
Wow.
patients
Yeah.
not to convert water into wine because we really don't support the use of wine. But I have had patients call me and say that you fast patients up to 40 days. Do you also treat them how to part the Red Sea?
Mhm.
And I tell them it's all in the wrist action. It's like,
yeah, we got to get a staff here, right? Like, but like, I mean, you have seen so many people fast for so long, and it's like, what have you noticed about, if you want to say, is there any difference? Like, how do you know when to do a 20-day fast? How do you know when to do a 40-day fast? Why did Jesus do a 40-day fast?
right. Well, I can't speak to Jesus. He wasn't a patient of ours, and I don't talk
Sure.
about specific patients. But as far as the reason we use longer term fasting depends on the patient and their reserves in the problem. So, for example, with some conditions, it's really obvious. If you have high blood pressure, we want to fast you however long it takes to normalize your blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
If you have diabetes, we want to fast you long enough so that when you eat well, you'll be able to maintain normal sugars without having to use medication. If you have a chronic pain problem, we want to fast till the pain is gone, and we believe that you're stable enough that you won't get into pain when we feed you. If you have lymphoma, we want to fast you long enough that you'll get well healthier faster than you're getting sick, so you get a good outcome and make us look good. So we know clinically how to not go too long. In other words, if you fast and you keep fasting long enough, eventually you enter starvation and then you die. Well, we don't do that because it would be really bad on our outcome data. And we know we can do that safely because we've done it 25,000 times in a row. And every patient that's walked in has walked out. And we do everything we can to make sure nobody screws up our safety data. So that's where all the monitoring and the blood values and the twice daily checks to make sure we don't go too long. Now, how do you know what's the ideal? Eventually, we'll have reliable, non-invasive biological markers we'll be able to call on. And, as a 501c3 research organization, we look like a clinic. We're actually a human subject laboratory disguised as a clinic because what we're doing is conducting that very research. But we don't have those reliable variables today to tell you what's ideal. What we can tell you is we will not go too long. We'll keep it safe. In terms of optimum, sometimes we'll do a very long fast up to 40 days. Other times we'll do several fasts of shorter duration spread out over time, depending on the person's reserves and their capacities, their time, etc. So that's a highly individual, situation. There is a diminishing return, though. At some point, if you try to fast longer than the person's reserves, you can get into problems. We avoid that by not letting people, and we have parameters that we follow. We look at their electrolytes, we look at their glucose levels, we look at their body, their total body reserves and their BMI, etc. So we have a number of parameters that we follow. We know when those protocols are followed, it can be done safely.
Got it. And so I just want to reiterate, guys, I don't know if you heard, 25,000 out of 25,000. I mean, you try to go anywhere so far and make that 25,001, adding me to that list. Every single person has gone through this safely. So, Dr. Goldhamer, I also want to touch on one kind of like concluding here on one more kind of subject, and it's on leadership, because I see a lot of people are trying to create health centers. They're trying to create detox centers are becoming a popular thing. But when I came here, and a lot of people are trying and doing okay and failing, but some people, like, they're doing it really well here from the top down. And I'm talking about even the janitors are happy. Like, everybody's like kind of, there's a feeling there. It's conducive to healing. And I also noticed, I think it was New Year's Day, you sent the entire kitchen staff home, and I walked into the kitchen and you had sent the staff home and you were working the kitchen. The concept of leadership. Could you tell me a little bit about,
First of all, it was me and my son. My son and I have a family tradition for the last, 30 years. We've worked the key holidays, the Christmas, the New Year's. People want to be home with their families and that kind of stuff. And my family's here. All my family works at True North Health. My daughter's a bookkeeper. My wife is a doctor. My son handles all the repair work and the stuff of the thing. So it is kind of a family, business. So we've always traditionally spent the holidays here. That way staff can be off on the holidays. It's also the few days a year that I really have to work. So it really makes me appreciate how hard the staff work every day in and out, and I think it's a good thing for people that are running any organization to at least spend some time doing everything people do. And, I think the staff appreciate the fact that we appreciate just how hard they're working. And they know that because we did their job for them for a few days a year. And, so I think it's a good thing. And it makes them also realize we value the work that they're doing. We realize how critical and fundamental it is to the operation.
Yeah.
And also, in fairness, who wants to, I'd rather take off other days when you can go do what you want to do. Holidays are a terrible time to be off. Everybody's crowded. It's busy. It's expensive. So it's not like we're really sacrificing anything. We celebrate the solstices instead of the traditional Christmas days or the traditional New Year's days. And so we have our own holidays, our own family traditions. And I think the staff really appreciate it. So it's I think it's a good exchange. Plus, when we take our time off, everything's half price and there's no crowds and it's wonderful. So I don't tell anybody, but actually I think we're having a much better deal than they do.
I hear that. That's beautiful.
Also, we have a really good staff. We have 70 people that work here, but they're hired based on their commitment to what we're doing rather than their skill set or their educational background. So, the people that are working here are working for the right reason. They want to be here. They appreciate the environment. The doctors, we're like the firm. Once they start, they don't stop, because it's one of the few places doctors get to work where they actually see their patients get well.
Yeah.
And so it's such a powerful influence for some doctors that really like that and value that. That's why they could make more money working in other facilities and doing procedures. And there's lots of ways to make money in medicine today. But they're working here and they work hard here because they happen to, that rings their bell, the chance they can actually get people well. And that may not be important to all doctors, but it is important to the doctors that are working here at the True North Health Center. We say they're kind of like unicorns because they're doctors that aren't complete idiots, and they're sensitive to the causes of health and healthful living. And they value that.
Yeah.
And we really do have some great attendings. We have 5 attendings here that handle the primary care of our patients. And any one of those attendings, I'll guarantee I'd put them up against any attendings anywhere.
Yeah, and I vouch for that because I've been here, for the last 2.5 weeks, and like everything Dr. Goldhamer is saying is absolutely true, and I can feel that energy pervade, and it's very conducive. The people care; they're seeing people get better, and once again, I just want to kind of, Dr. Goldhamer, do you are doctors able to come here and train and learn about what you guys do?
Yes, we have an active internship residency training. There's no cost to the doctor. We provide room, board, and training. It's provided by our foundation, the True North Health Foundation. And so there's no cost, and doctors, and it depends on their goals. It can be, shorter times or longer period of training, depending on what they need. But the idea is to get more doctors familiar with the use of a whole plant food SOS-free diet and the use of fasting, so that they can actually take this type of work and use it in a broad fashion. That's part of the mandate of our foundation, is to provide public education, but including training doctors. And so we've had hundreds of doctors over the last 40 years come through and do these internship and residency training. And I have to tell you, the very best of the ones are the ones we hire, and they're still working here. So, if you look, even Dr. Sultana, who's our medical director now, he started as an intern, 30 years ago, and we just never let him leave.
Smart. Dr. Goldhamer, what would you say to a Western typical doctor right now who might be hearing this for the first time, who's been through the medical system? They're about 55 years old. They're just treating, nobody's getting better.
Well, if you want to do something worthwhile with your life before you retire, and you want to see some people get well, come in, do a rotation, see what it's like to actually get people well using diet and fasting, and either join us here at the True North Health Center, or better yet, open up your own facility and get a chance to spend the last 10 or 20 years of your life doing something worthwhile. And that way you'll go to heaven instead of hell.
And, it's funny because like most doctors go into medical school with that intention. They want to help people. And so this is an offer, man. Like, it's happening. This is how you do it. There's a model that works, and they're training doctors. And that's going to be so important, I think, for so many of us.
It's just hard to practice like this if you're forced to see 26 patient contacts a day and 20 emails on top of it. Because there's only so many hours in the day. So you have to be in a model where they'll allow you to spend enough time to actually work with motivated patients that want to get well. That's the key to our success for the doctors. It's not only do what we do works, but we're selecting, half of our people come from out of state, 15% are foreign. We're cherry picking out the people that are willing to do dangerous and radical things like eat well, and exercise, and go to bed on time, and do fasting. And when you have highly motivated patients, whether they're sick or not, you have a chance to get them well. It's hard when you have patients that don't want to quit smoking or drinking or change their diet. They just want a pill, potion, or powder to alleviate their symptoms. That's not our patient population. We get everybody else's best patients, most motivated patients being referred here to do what seems like a really radical intervention, diet and fasting. But for those patients, this is fabulous, and it does work well. But you couldn't apply it to everybody because most people aren't willing to do this.
Yeah. And so just to kind of end here, just kind of like a fun question here. Dr. Allen, your 25-year-old younger self is in an elevator. He just fresh out of medical school. Knowing what you know now, the wisdom that you carry now, you walk into this elevator and you have a little trip up the Empire State Building with him, and you can give him a piece of wisdom to your younger version of yourself. What piece of wisdom would you leave with him?
Well, I'd follow my dad's advice. Stick to your guns.
Stick to your guns. And and that's a beautiful way for me to also kind of envelop what I feel right now. I can stick to my guns because I am me. And in my organic, natural state, I'm just me. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you're listening, pretty much what we've said is, you know, from anxiety to depression, resetting your gut microbiome, to end of life care, to quality of life care, to reversing heart disease, to reversing diabetes, to improve resetting your taste bud, resetting your dopamine system, and not only that, for peak performance and for you to access your next level. 25,000 out of 25,000 have come here, and they've left safe and improved. And we're also talking about decreased cancer markers. All of these things are happening, and Dr. Allen is doing the research and gathering the scientific evidence.
If your listeners are interested in knowing whether this might be applicable to them, they can go to our website at healthpromoting.com, complete the registration forms, and after a no-cost phone conversation with them, I'll be happy to talk to them about whether or not any of this might be applicable to their situation.
Yeah. So for anybody highly motivated out there, whether for you or your family, go to truenorthhealthcenter.com and sign up on, click on the begin your journey there, and someone will reach out to you and to see if this might be, if you're ready for this, because it's been, for me personally, it's been one of the most beautiful things that I've ever experienced, actually, and I'm so excited just to understand that this is here, this is available. They're training people, they're getting the research. And we ain't even had breakfast yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Dr. Allen, so much for your precious time and for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.